Welcome to Circular Action Alliance's third quarter webinar of 2025. Hard to believe we're already here in September. So I'm Lorene Urbina. I lead the communications team here at Circular Action Alliance, commonly known as CAA. And before we proceed, those of you who have been on these calls before have seen our legal disclaimer, but I'll go through this very quickly and just repeat that this information is purely for informational purposes and does not constitute any legal advice. We do encourage you to consult with your own legal counsel for any legal matters related to any of the topics we're discussing today. So we have over 1,000 folks registered for today's webinar, and I think quite a few may be new in joining us. So we'll kick things off with a very brief overview of Circular Action Alliance before we dive in. So I'll say that CAA is the nonprofit producer responsibility organization, and we're responsible for implementing the circular economy through paper and packaging EPR, or extended producer responsibility. CAA was founded in 2022 by a group of companies spanning food, beverage, consumer goods, and retail industries, with the goal to help producers meet their EPR obligations and drive towards ambitious goals that further packaging circularity. So for nearly 3 years now, CAA has been pursuing our mission to help producers comply with EPR laws, deliver harmonized best-in-class services, and work with governments, businesses, and communities to reduce waste and recycle more. If you can believe it, the last time that we were here together on a quarterly webinar in June, we were just on the cusp of launching our first EPR program in Oregon. So a lot has happened in 3 short months. So today you'll hear a lot more about what we've been up to in states other than Oregon. We'll also give you a bit of an Oregon update as well. And then just before we jump in, a few housekeeping notes. First, this webinar is open to all interested parties. It will be recorded and shared on our website in the coming days. So don't worry if you miss anything, you will have an opportunity to listen. We will open up our Q&A at the end of the session and hope to reserve about 15 minutes for that. We have a great group of folks here to answer your questions. So to keep things organized, we do ask that you use the Q&A feature in Zoom for your questions. We'll be watching for trends, and we'll have our panelists answer the most popular questions at the end of the call today. We do review all of the questions that come in, so even if they don't get answered on the call, those will be used to inform future content for webinars and other communications that we're doing. All right, so just a quick look at the agenda. First up, you'll hear from Jeff Inch, our SVP of Producer Services, who will provide an update on key dates and actions for producers. Next, we'll move on and introduce you to Emily Coven, our California Executive Director, who will share an update on our work in California. Following that, we'll have Rachel Zerowin, our Colorado Communications Manager. She'll provide an update on Colorado, followed by Alex Bertolucci, our Oregon Communications Manager, who will share an update on what's happening in Oregon. And then finally, we'll close things out with Kristen Noeth, who will talk a little bit about what's happening in emerging states. So with that, I will turn things over to Jeff Inch, and he will talk to you about producer services.
Thank you very much, Lorene. Wonderful to be here and really happy to give everybody an update on where we are within our producer timelines for 2025.
Oh, Jeff, you got muted.
I apologize for that.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go. Sorry about that. So yeah, let's jump into the timeline. We're really excited to kind of give everybody an update. And as we've talked about this in previous webinars, you can see just an amazing amount of work that has gone into meeting these producer timelines this year, not only on the CAA side, but for each one of our producers that are moving through this process. It's been wonderful to work with them and really help to build all of these programs and the national model that CAA has put together to really help simplify guidance and reporting for producers. And we've accomplished a lot. So I think it's always really important to do a look back here over the last few months. In Oregon, we completed our first supply report. And as Lorene mentioned, the program launched in July. We are working through updates on the 2026 program fee schedule, which I'll talk about in a second. But we do not have an additional report for that. And we'll talk about that when we get to the next slide. Colorado, we just concluded our producer reporting cycle that concluded on July 31st. California, we have an active process open right now on registration and reporting, which we will touch on as well. And we did a formal registration process in Minnesota to meet the requirements there, which was successful. And we'll talk about that as well as we close out the session today. Let's go to the next slide. So just kind of looking ahead, I think one important question we wanted to address on Oregon this year is we are in the process of finalizing the 2026 EPR fees for Oregon. Producers do not have to submit a new supply report. However, we will be using the data that was submitted on March 31st, 2025 in order to inform the 2026 fee schedule. And that is, as a reminder, the 2024 supply data. So we are now given that we had kind of a half-year initial start in the Oregon program, we are now in sync with our long-term rhythm of supply data trailing 2 years of the program period. So we will get on track with that in Oregon, and we'll be releasing that fee schedule later in the fourth quarter. To be clear, the 2026 program year is the calendar year, January to December. We'll be publishing the fees, as I mentioned, and I just want to also flag that anybody who has been involved in making adjustments to their producer report or corrections that have been issued will be reflected in the fee setting data for 2026. So that will be the most accurate data that is being used for 2026 producer fees in Oregon. Let's go to the next slide. All right, and then kind of doing a double click here on Colorado. Just want to commend the team as well as all the producers out there that participated in Colorado's July 31st producer supply report. We had very strong participation. We were very excited to see a lot of the national producers that had worked with us in Oregon also submit reports in Colorado. We've done a tremendous amount of validation on those reports so far. We do know that there are still people, as the program is relatively new, working on late reports. So we're encouraging them to get those in as soon as possible, and we are focused on supporting them in that process. We are working to finalize the EPR due rate schedule for Colorado. That will be published as well in Q4, and we will be working to issue invoices for the start of the 2026 program year in January. And we do want to remind you, we've talked about this a lot if you've worked with us on Colorado. There was an important clause here that we pointed to over the last several months, which is that effective July 1st, in order to be participating in the program, you needed to report to us, and that due date was July 31st. And in order to remain compliant with the law, we need to have producers in on that date. So we encourage you, if you are behind in any way, to get those reports in. Like I mentioned, we had a lot of great participation, but just want to make sure producers are aware that participating in the program is a requirement to remain compliant with Colorado's EPR law. Great, let's go to the next slide. All right, and then exciting time in California, in fact. So the month of August, we worked on updating registration information, which was a requirement in California to obtain some additional information within your registration. Thank you to the thousands of producers that participated in that process. We are now moving into a reporting cycle for California, which will really round out the bulk of our 2025 producer compliance activities. We have and are in the process of preparing a number of critical guidance materials that will support this reporting cycle. Even in August of this year, we produced a definition of producer document to help support producers. We are in the final stages of releasing the covered materials and producer definitions, which is familiar to many who have worked with us in other states. Preparing to report your supply data. California will have a unique document that will be able to support some of the unique aspects of reporting supply data in California. As we've done in other states, we will launch the portal and we will have a preparation workbook. And then we will also be working to publish early fee rate estimated ranges based on the data that we're receiving. So yeah, very exciting time in California. I know there's a lot of questions out there on exactly how to go finish your report for California. These documents, which will be coming out very soon, will absolutely answer most of those questions. And we are also here to support those questions on this webinar. So with that, I'd love to, and speaking of California, I would also love to introduce Emily Coven, who is going to talk about California and give us an update on the program. Emily, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Much appreciated. We can go to our next slide here. This is a little awkward. It's me. It's a slide about me. But so I have just joined CAA a couple weeks ago. I'm the new California Executive Director. It's fantastic to be here. I have been learning a ton from all of my colleagues here and really getting up to speed, but still a lot to learn. So just quickly on my background, it's more in the municipal side of things than in the EPR and producer side of things, because we're going to have a lot of work to do in California to improve our recycling system there. I worked a lot on SB 1383, which is kind of the big law that came before SB 54 being the big law in California, on compliance with that, which was more around organics and general recycling. So anyways, a lot of experience with CalRecycle, with local governments, with haulers, with all of the stakeholders, and looking forward to building a team and applying that experience to achieving great success here in California. Next slide. So one of the big things that we are doing starting week after next is our consultation series. So these are going to be a series of public webinars open to anybody and everybody. And we really want to use this to get input from anyone who's interested and has an opinion on SB 54. California has 40 million residents. So as far as I'm concerned, we have 40 million stakeholders. I don't think they're all going to register, but we really are hoping for a really strong response and people coming and hearing about what we're working on and giving their feedback. So as much as hearing from us during the webinar, we want to hear from people during the webinar, sending in their questions. We're also going to be sending out post-webinar questionnaire, to get input and feedback from the community. So the webinars are open for registration right now. They are going to start on October 6th and run for a month. I think there's, I want to say maybe 11 of them, something like that. Actually, if we go to the next slide, you can take a quick look here. There's also a link in the chat, so you can pull up that list in front of you and see which of these might be of interest to you and make sure that you are registered for those. But they kick off on October 6th, they wrap up on November 6th, and they run all throughout the month of October and November in between. So please sign up. Tell your friends, tell everybody you know. We want it to be very well attended, and we really, really want to hear what California and other stakeholders selling into California have to say. And then final thing for me is, as some of you may be aware, the California regulatory process is still underway. So here at CAA, we're doing the best that we can without final regulations. But this is a big step right now that's happening towards getting to final regulations. So CalRecycle released a final draft, or an official draft for public comment on August 22nd, and we are in the middle of a 45-day public comment period that's going to end on October 7th. So if you have any interest in having your voice heard by the state on how the regulations land, this is now your opportunity. You've got a couple more weeks to submit public comment. After that, the state will receive all the comments, process them, and our anticipation is at some point thereafter, and we don't know that timeline exactly, we will hopefully, fingers crossed, have final regulations. So that's kind of high level for California, and I will now hand it over to Rachel for Colorado.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Emily. So I am Rachel Zarowin, the Communications Manager for Circular Action Alliance Colorado, and we can go ahead and jump right into that first slide. So the biggest thing to happen in the last 3 months since we saw you on this last quarterly webinar was that the Producer Responsibility Advisory Board in Colorado, they recommended to the regulator to approve CAA's plan. Big stuff. So if we go to the next slide, you can kind of see how we got here. So in what you see grayed out, we submitted that plan proposal back in February. There's been a couple rounds of review by the advisory board. We made some revisions to ensure that it was compliant with the act. And now where that stands is the program plan is with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. So they have 120 days to review that plan. And as part of that process, they conducted a formal public comment period, which is now closed. So they're reviewing those comments, reviewing the plan, and what we are hopeful for is a mid-December program plan approval. And with that, once we have an approved program plan, we will then begin implementation within 6 months. So the other deadline, or not deadline, but the other big timeline milestone that I want to call out to you on this slide is that producer dues should be published by October 31st. And along with that comes eco-modulation guidance. So if we go to the next slide, we can look at eco-modulation. And what it is, it's a schedule of bonuses and malices. If we do bring that up, you'll see it's 8 different factors, and we're required to include those eco-modulation factors in our plan. So again, that schedule of bonuses decreases dues, and then malices would increase dues. So if we can get those up on the next slide, we'll be able to look at what those specifically are. There we go. So again, like an incentive or a bonus might look like high levels of post-consumer recycled content included in a package. Whereas a package that disrupts the recycling of other materials, those could see increased dues. So again, these are in the program plan as written, and you can see that program plan on our website. So then if we go to the next slide, in addition to those 8 eco-modulation factors that are required of CAA, the regulator is also required to develop an eco-modulation bonus schedule. So they have developed draft rules with stakeholder input, and those are available on the CDPHE website. I can pop that link in the chat here when I'm done. Do know that they are continuing a public comment period on those draft rules, and that's open for, what is that, another 6 days? And then once they've completed the draft, then the Solid and Hazardous Waste Commission formally approves those rules on November 18th. So the big thing for you to know is that we're continuing to engage with CDPHE on those bonus benchmarks to support a successful 2026 program launch. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Alex over in Oregon.
Thank you, Rachel. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here today. I'm Alex Bertolucci, the Oregon Communications Manager. I'm going to give you a little update on Oregon's program. So the big thing that recently happened here in Oregon is there was a meeting of the Oregon Recycling Council. Some big news came out of that. Oregon DEQ approved our program plan amendment for Bonus C, which is one of Oregon's eco-modulation bonuses there. This meeting that just happened was last week on September 17th. CAA presented the Responsible End Market Program Plan Amendment, our 2025 financials, and a practicability study on pressurized cylinders and metal aerosol cans. You can find more information on all of those on DEQ's website. That's recyclingact.oregon.gov. While you're there, you can also provide public comment on the Responsible End Market Amendment, and that's open through October 15th. So again, you can find that information on the website. You can find the amendment there, and you can find a way to provide that public comment if you're interested in doing that. The next slide is going to talk about the upcoming Rulemaking 3 that DEQ will be hosting here in Oregon. There's some info sessions that are coming up for that. One is just this afternoon, and I think we have some links that I can make sure to pop in the chat here in just a bit, but there will be one today and then one this Wednesday in the evening. Both of those times are Pacific, so just note that if you're outside of Oregon or the West Coast, that 5:30 to 6:30 is Pacific time. Moving on to the next slide, here's some updates about individual areas that we've been working on. So the Oregon program, we had the requirement to do some advertising statewide, and that falls under our Recycle On campaign. That officially launched at the beginning of August, and since then we've had some really good feedback and results with that. Most of those ads are driving folks to the recycleon.org/Oregon website, building awareness of the changes that are coming. We'll have a few more campaigns coming in the next couple weeks. They'll start launching, but we've been using a number of different channels, and as you can see there, our YouTube video alone has about 3.2 million on the English and just under 450,000 on the Spanish. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok if you want to see what we're up to there and learn about how to be a good recycler here in Oregon. Moving to the next slide, another exciting part of the Oregon program is the Oregon Audit Center, which will be collecting samples of recycling from sorting facilities around the state starting this fall. So right now we're ramping that up. And the goal is to have over 120 samples that we would collect and sort by the end of October. This will help us provide information about what's in the recycling, what kind of contaminants we're seeing, if there's anything that we need to do to address issues in different parts of the state, and just keep an eye on what's coming in and how much of it. Last slide for me will focus on the Recycle On centers. So these are the recycling centers that will open around the state. There will be 144 of them by the end of 2027. The first one just arrived down in Southern Oregon at the beginning of the month, and we'll be doing kind of a ribbon cutting grand opening for some of these down there in October. These will continue to roll out over time, and they'll collect things that aren't accepted in the curbside bin, such as plastic bags and plastic lids. So we're excited to get those moving forward. And with that, I will turn it over to Kristen.
Great, thank you, Alex. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kristen Noeth. I'm the VP for EPR Regulatory Compliance here at CAA. We wanted to provide you with a current snapshot, really, of the status in our emerging states. And we consider Minnesota, Maryland, as well as Maine and Washington to be emerging states. And we'll continue to provide, updates during this quarterly webinar, particularly as those programs, become kind of more in flight and similar to our programs in California, Oregon, and Colorado. So with that, I'll just walk through Minnesota. And again, this is a kind of framework update for where we are. A lot of these requirements right now are based in statute. And we wanted to kind of give you the update of what regulators are kind of working on in those states as well. So of course, CA is the pro for the interim kind of program plan period in Minnesota. Next year, we'll be looking at producer reporting per the statute. On the covered material list, the state is developing the covered material list in Minnesota. It's our understanding that a working draft will be prepared by the state by the end of the year. We're looking at December 2025 in terms of timing. And that, of course, will direct and influence the forthcoming CA producer guidance on the lists and the reporting categories. Just to point on the needs assessment, and we'll point that out across each of the state sheets here, which of course provided to you in the webinar recording and materials. So we're consulting with the state as well. The state is responsible for developing the preliminary needs assessment, which is due at the end of this year. And the initial kind of more fulsome assessment will be due at the end of next year. So we'll look forward to that. We can move to the next slide, which is Maryland. Great, thank you. So CA is also the approved pro in Maryland for the interim, the initial kind of 5-year period. Again, similar to Minnesota, statutory requirement is that producers must register by July 1 of next year and 26 annually thereafter. Similar to Minnesota, we are consulting with Maryland as the state is developing their covered material list, which again is a precursor to and will influence our producer guidance. And the idea is that we've heard from the state is that that list will be provided in draft potentially this fall and certainly by the end of this year. And it is our goal and continued plan to work with states for harmonization for producer reporting categories, definitions, across the state so that there is alignment for producer reporting where possible. And that continues to be a focus for us. Also on the needs assessment, we're working with Maryland to compare the needs assessment that was conducted pursuant to the 2023 statute, and then what is kind of additional and maybe required for additional needs assessment study in the state of Maryland. Great, we can just go to the last slide, please. Washington and Maine, we've done a combined slide here. CA, of course, as you likely know, intends to apply to become the pro in each of those states. Under the statute in Washington, producers will appoint a pro by January 1 of next year, and the potential pro must register in March of next year, and that's with the Washington Department of Ecology that will be administering the EPR program for the state of Washington. In Maine, it's rather than be called a pro, the language in the statute, of course, is a stewardship organization, so it's an SO. And Maine anticipates issuing their RFP later this fall. And CA is, as well as other potential SOs would respond to that RFP to become the pro for the state of Maine. And the anticipation deadline, or excuse me, date of contract award, or responding to the RFP and issuing the award by the state of Maine is next spring, potentially April of next year. A few points on the needs assessment, cover material list, and producer reporting. Knowing that it's early days in those states, we wanted to provide you with kind of what we know now and what we are anticipating and starting to plan for. Washington State itself, of course, is required to complete their preliminary needs assessment by January 31 of next year of 26, and then complete the full assessment by the following year, December 31, 2027. And in Maine, it's a little bit different. The SO, the stewardship organization, conducts a needs assessment within certain time periods, a year and a half of the contract award. We have seen Maine release draft rules specifying the initial material types in Maine, and we're looking for that to be kind of finalized. And then the last piece is on producer reporting, which we anticipate we'll know more when we see the RFP from Maine when that's issued, what the requirements are, but we're expecting and kind of forecasting for the state to want to collect data by mid-year next year, 2026. Great, thank you. And I'll turn it back to you, Lorraine.